So what is it that these legislators are afraid of? If they themselves believe in progress, if Governor Lamont is actively saying, hey, we believe you should buy an EV. Here's money for you to buy an EV. And in fact, you can even use the cheaper rebate money to buy a Tesla, but yet that's out of one side of their mouth, but out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying, oh, sorry, Rivian, Lucid, Tesla, you can't sell in the state. What is so powerful about this dealer network or these dealer franchise that are influencing these lobbyists? This seems ridiculous to me. I don't understand this.
Advanced Clean Car 2 extends the scope of the regulations beyond just light-duty vehicles so that it includes medium and heavy-duty vehicles, and that's referred to as ACT, Advanced Clean Trucks. Mm-hmm. California has adopted them. So have a number of states around the country, including neighboring states to Connecticut, like New York and Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware. Connecticut has not yet adopted them.
Welcome to another episode of Out of Spec Dave, where today I've got a very special guest. His name is Barry Kresch. He is actually the president of the EV Club of Connecticut. And I've met Barry a couple of different times. He actually asked me to speak at the EV Symposium here in Connecticut, which was a lot of fun. I actually had that recorded and put that up. I'll put a link to that in the description below. But it's funny. I've been working so hard during the day and filming videos on the weekends, and I feel like I want to try and get a little bit more involved with some of the ongoing issues that are happening at the state level. And who better than Barry to reach out to? And it's really funny. I was talking to Kyle about this, and literally like 3 days after that, there was an article published in the Connecticut Mirror, which is a local journal here in Connecticut. It was an op-ed written by Barry. And I was like, at least when sometimes things just happen and you're like, okay, it's time for me to reach out to Barry. So what I thought I would do, so I did that. And he said, yeah, I'd love to come on the channel and kind of share my thoughts about that article. And I'd really like everyone to get to know Barry. He's a leader in the community. We live about 4 towns away from each other, and it's a nasty, messy day today. So we're doing this remote. We were hopefully going to do this down at like Campo Beach in Westport or something like that. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'm looking forward to learning quite a bit from Barry, and let's get into it and see what's on his mind. So Barry, welcome to the channel. Thank you again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and your role and perhaps your professional life and also what you do on the EV side of things as well.
Well, thank you, Dave. I'm the president of the Electric Vehicle Club of Connecticut. This is an all-volunteer organization. It's not what I do for my day job, which is media research consulting. And we have as our mission to be evangelists for EV adoption in the state of Connecticut, to help clean up our environment, to get the word out about how good EVs really are and how much fun they are to drive. We interact on an individual level, at a grassroots level, at a small group level by speaking to sustainability committees or churches or Rotaries or YMCAs, etc. And we are also active in the policy front, and we track data. So we try and pretty much cover the waterfront. We are also one of a number of organizations that, from a policy perspective, are a part of the Connecticut EV Coalition, which includes other great organizations like Save the Sound, the Sierra Club, the Conservation Law Foundation, the League of Conservation, and a number of others. So we work through that organization for the advocacy part of our portfolio.
This article that was written back on January 19th, or at least published back on January 19th in the Connecticut Mirror, I'll put that up right here so you can all see that. EV adoption is critical to clean air goals and can be achieved in Connecticut. First of all, let me ask you, why did you write the article? What was it that you're trying to accomplish?
There's a set of regulations that's pending for authorization by the legislature called Advanced Clean Cars 2. Now, your listeners may recall there was such a thing called advanced clean cars that was implemented by California decades ago, and which Connecticut has followed for the past roughly 20 years. And it was about stricter fuel efficiency standards for vehicles. Those regulations were so successful that the manufacturers basically have been building to the California standards rather than the looser federal standards. Now, those expire in 2025, and there's a follow-on set of regulations. Advanced Clean Car 2 extends the scope of the regulations beyond just light-duty vehicles so that it includes medium and heavy-duty vehicles, and that's referred to as ACT, Advanced Clean Trucks. Mm-hmm. California has adopted them. So have a number of states around the country, including neighboring states to Connecticut, like New York and Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware. Connecticut has not yet adopted them. It requires this action from the legislature, and it's been in the news for several months because the bipartisan legislative review committee that was the final step in adopting these regulations balked last year. They kind of actually went beyond their remit, which is, strictly speaking, only to look at whether the intentions of the regulations as drafted fulfill the intent of the requirements, which they clearly do. But anyway, it didn't get past this committee. The governor pulled it, and now it's before the legislature. Environmental legislation seems, unfortunately, to have become increasingly partisan over the years. When Connecticut adopted the original set of clean car regulations, it was a near unanimous vote of the legislature. The authorization for ACC2 had a very small amount of Republican support, and it's now basically in the hands of the Democratic caucus. And they could pass it because they have a 2-to-1 majority in the legislature. But we don't know where that's going. That's still under discussion at this time.
Is the proposed legislation, acceptable to what you believe should be in there, or is it not quite what you would hope to be in there?
Well, we don't know what the legislation will be because they haven't come out with a final bill. We know what the regulations are, so the regulations are acceptable. Yes, if the legislation says we are authorizing these regulations, that would be very acceptable. If they have a little bit of wiggle room to modify it, not a lot, because the federal government only granted California the ability to come up with its own set of regulations since they have been in the business of doing this for so long. So there's only a limited amount of things that they can do, and we don't yet know what they might propose. So whether we ultimately endorse this or not, it's a little too soon to say.
So by writing this article, what you were hoping to do is bring light to the fact that this is something that is proposed and it's going to be voted on, and you're trying to advocate that it should be passed. And is that the real motivation? Yes,
it is. And more specifically, please reach out to your state representatives, your representative in both the House and the Senate, because they will be involved in these discussions and ultimately have a vote.
Okay. Can you go over a little bit about what you discussed in the article with respect to cost of manufacturing and all of that?
I follow that data on Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and the cost per kilowatt hour, I think, was something like $138 in 2023, and by the end of the decade, that forecast is for it to be about $80, and it's generally considered that when the cost per kilowatt hour in manufacturing a battery crosses the $100 threshold, will be when you have a cost parity between an electric vehicle and an internal combustion vehicle. Now, that's cost parity in terms of purchase price, right? It'll be advantageous to EVs when you incorporate incentives, right? And the federal incentive will be around through 2032, and the state incentive will be around, I don't know exactly when it will expire, but another 4 or 5 years at least. And then, of course, you get the benefits of lower maintenance costs and lower operating costs.
I'm just curious to your thoughts about charging, if you can break it down into home charging versus DC fast charging. What is it that the EV Club of Connecticut tries to do to educate people about charging their cars once they've bought one? Now, how do you charge it?
Well, one of the obstacles to getting someone to buy an EV is their hesitancy and lack of knowledge about how charging works and how it will work within their use of the car. And when I do these talks to these different organizations, I think I end up getting the most questions about that subject relative to anything else.
Yeah.
And so, I explain the differences between levels 1, 2, and 3. And I explain, I can show them the data that most people drive about 40 miles a day. And if they have a place where they can install their own charger, life is very easy with an EV. It's just, you just think about it a little differently. You don't have to think about, when am I going to get to the gas station twice a week? You just plug it in overnight and charge it. And people have questions about what's involved in installing one in their home, and the chargers themselves are starting to become more powerful because the onboard chargers in the vehicles are getting faster. And people's panels have a certain capacity, and they have to figure out what they can fit or what kind of load sharing device they might want to install. And so we try to guide them through all of that. We position DC charging as something that you do exactly as you described, that when you're taking a road trip and you don't want to spend a long time charging, you find one of these DC fast chargers, and 20 or 30 minutes later, you're back on the road. For someone who doesn't have access to charging at home, and this is probably the biggest pain point right now with respect to charging infrastructure, if they have to live off DC fast chargers, it's a little more challenging and a little more expensive. Not everybody knows that they should really try and maintain at least 20% state of charge if they're going to go to one of these. Because, for example, if you have a Tesla, if you tell the Tesla where you're going to charge, it will preheat the battery before you get there, which will do a lot to speed up how quickly the vehicle will charge. It's important to, if you're able to, have the car plugged in before you leave, so that you've preheated the battery and have made the thermal management efficient. And I'll give a shout out to your son, who did a great YouTube video about going out to Chicago and talking about what he found with what was going on there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people there seems to be both a lack of education and an obvious need for expanded charging infrastructure.
One of the things I also saw, either you or EV Club of Connecticut just recently posted an article about using the cheaper data to kind of rate, let's say the engagement of dealers by brand and all of that, and the education that they're providing their clients or their customers at the point of sale. Can you talk a little bit about what we, as, let's just say, people in the community that may understand this better than the average person who just buys an EV to start with, what can we be doing to enhance, let's say, dealer education or consumer education?
I speak to a lot of consumers in their EV shopping journey. Yes, I plead guilty. I wrote that blog post. I downloaded data from the cheaper portal and sorted it by make and by dealer. Because I have people writing to the club and they say, I went to dealer X and the salesperson didn't know anything about electric vehicles, and they didn't have an EV charged up for a test drive, and they tried to persuade me to buy an internal combustion vehicle, and they're a little frustrated, even angry. And so then they say, well, where should I go? I'm really interested in a Bolt or an Ioniq 5 or one of the other non-Teslas in this case.
Yep.
And I don't personally know all 270 new car dealers in the state. So I decided to try and use the cheaper data as a proxy. And I have always known anecdotally that there are some dealers who are really on top of it and really make an effort, and others who are just not interested. It's very common that a dealer will have one EV expert.
Right.
If he's out to lunch when you get there, you're out of luck. And so we look at the number of rebates that the dealers have given out, and this only applies to makes that are below the cheaper MSRP cap threshold. So it doesn't apply to Mercedes or Volvo and some of the more expensive brands.
Yeah, and what I found interesting was that Toyota, of all brands, had, I think, some of the top numbers of cheaper claims or rebates, in at least with the data that you had looked at from in 2023. And there's different levels of cheaper rebates. Cheaper, just so you know, well, can you just describe what cheaper stand for? I don't want to think like it's a cheaper car. It's an acronym for a program here in the state of Connecticut. I can't remember exactly what it stands for.
Connecticut Hydrogen Electric Automobile Purchase Rebate.
Okay,
I have it right, but
yeah, that was pretty good, Barry. I mean, like, that was a test right there. I think you passed it. So basically, this is a set of funds set aside by the state of Connecticut. Not every state has state rebates. Some states have them. Some states, implement them in a year, then they run out of funds. And I know that there's stories. So whichever state you live in, check what your state is offering as far as a rebate. But what's nice about the cheaper rebate is that if you're buying a car that is eligible for the cheaper rebate here in the state of Connecticut, then the dealer will take that money right off the price of the car when you're buying the vehicle, as if you're putting money down on the vehicle, which is great. And a similar thing is now happening for the federal, what used to be state income credits. Now they're right off the hood as well, which I think is going to help a lot of people that are not necessarily cash buyers of EVs to be able to afford an EV in a little bit easier way. This whole concept of looking at the cheaper data to see where the majority of the claims are going it was a unique angle to be able to say, okay, I don't know all 270 dealers here in the state of Connecticut, but you and I both know, because anecdotally you walk into 10 or 15 dealers and there's always Bill, like you mentioned, he only works on Thursdays or he doesn't work on Thursdays. Sorry, you have to come back. But I think a lot of what's interesting is a lot of people that are researching EVs, they come to YouTube, and I get tremendous numbers of emails saying, hey, Dave, thanks so much for educating us about, how to charge, how to road trip. What is it like to lease an EV versus finance an EV? What's it like? What does it mean to get a federal tax rebate or a credit or these cheaper rebates? So I think the average person that's walking in these dealerships now, oftentimes they know more about the EVs than a lot of times the actual salespeople in the dealership. And like anything, you have this growth curve, and you hit that sort of inflection point where it's starting to get over to the masses, and that's just not going to cut it as we move forward here over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of EV adoption. So dealerships, I know they need to do a better job of explaining to their customers what all these rebates are, how it works, how to charge, how best to do things. And I applaud your efforts to try and get the word out there. And like I said before, I'd love to continue to help you do that.
The analysis in that blog post had to do with non-Teslas, but I don't want anyone to misinterpret it, because Teslas are eligible for cheaper rebates to the extent they have vehicles that are under $50,000, and they do.
Absolutely.
And DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection that designed and administers the program, thought about dealers when they were putting it together. And so when a consumer gets a cheaper rebate, the dealer also gets a small payment.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. Okay. Yeah. I mean, what is it about just anecdotally, I mean, what is it about dealers on average not embracing, the EV sort of phenomenon or direction? Why do you think that is?
I think there are a few things involved. I think the car business hasn't changed much in the past 40 or 50 years, and this technology is profoundly different, for the better. But they have to get themselves up the learning curve. They have to make investments because they need to have chargers at the dealership. And they need to buy the equipment that's necessary to repair these cars, which is different than the other equipment that they use. So they have a financial investment that they have to make, and they may be hesitant to make that investment while the market is still fairly young, even though it's growing. And I suspect some of them just culturally are resisting it. You may remember a year or so ago when Ford announced its Model E program, right? So Ford is basically giving dealerships an opportunity to opt in or not opt in to the program that they have developed for selling electric vehicles. And there are requirements if you do opt in. There are requirements in terms of having the charging equipment and other equipment. There are requirements about how you do business. For example, they want to standardize pricing. Now, according to franchise law, dealers have the right to set the price, but the rule is that every vehicle that the dealer sells of a particular model would have to have the same price. So there could be differences dealer to dealer, but they're trying to introduce a level of standardization and that still comports with what they're allowed to do within the scope of the franchise laws.
Right.
Right. They want concierge service, for pickup and drop off for servicing. So there are a number of rules in place and investments that they require. And a lot of the Ford dealers have been up in arms.
Yeah.
Even though it's a pretty well thought out program, in my opinion. For example, if there are chargers that are prominently displayed at a Ford dealership and the public can use them, that's a great way to get to know your Ford dealership.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to take it, and then you just won't get an allocation of EVs. You'll be part of Ford Blue.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, it's not cheap. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment, isn't it? At the Ford, with the Ford program. Is that correct?
That is correct. But when Ford talks about the level of investment, they don't know what incentives each individual dealer is going to be able to get. So the fact that the incentives that are offered through Eversource and United Illuminating will pay for the make ready, right? Basically pay for the installation of the charger and pay for half of the equipment. There are a lot of incentives out there that the dealers can take advantage of in installing this equipment. So I'm pretty sure that for most dealerships, the cost would actually be a lot less than the headline cost.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Let's shift gears just a little bit, Barry. I've never asked you this question, and I really don't know where your head is on this. But we've been talking about traditional dealers selling their cars, but let's talk about Tesla, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. You cannot buy a Tesla, with the exception at Mohegan Sun now, in the state of Connecticut. I personally don't even understand why. I guess I understand why the dealers don't want Tesla. Forget about Tesla. Let's say a direct to company sale to an individual, cutting out the middleman. But I just don't understand how, in this day and age, when a company comes along and has a better business model, whether it's better technology, a better sales model, a better service model, that they can be prevented from doing business in that state. I feel very strongly about that is un-American. I'm proud to say that. I think it's wrong, but I have no idea where you stand on that subject, and I'm curious.
Oh, our club strongly supports passing a direct sales law. So so the reason that Tesla and other companies like Rivian or Lucid can't open stores in Connecticut is the franchise laws that have been on the books for decades. And these laws came about to protect dealerships from their own affiliated manufacturers. So if an independent businessman opened a Ford dealership, he didn't want Ford to get somebody else to open a store across the street, or to have the company open a store across the street, put him out of business after he had gone to the trouble of developing that market. So that's ostensibly the reason for those laws. But because of the language in the laws that says that new cars have to be sold by a business that's independent of the manufacturer, they've been able to repurpose that language to prevent Tesla and other companies from opening stores. Excuse me. So we don't think it's a good idea. We know that this issue polls between 80 to 90% favorable with consumers in every state, including Connecticut, where there has been polling. I think it was 83% in Connecticut. And it cuts across age, ethnicity, party affiliation. You know, this is a consumer issue. This is not a political issue. The only place where it's divisive is in Hartford, where the dealers are a very powerful lobbying force, and the legislature is reluctant to take them on. So even though there are some legislators who are in favor of doing this, they've had a hard time getting it raised by committee chairs. And as long as I have been making an effort to try and get it passed, which is at least 10 years, it has yet to come up for a vote before the full chamber in both chambers. There was 1 year where I think it passed the House, but not the Senate.
So what is it that these legislators are afraid of? If they themselves believe in progress, if Governor Lamont is actively saying, hey, we believe you should buy an EV. Here's money for you to buy an EV. And in fact, you can even use the cheaper rebate money to buy a Tesla, but yet that's out of one side of their mouth, but out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying, oh, sorry, Rivian, Lucid, Tesla, you can't sell in the state. What is so powerful about this dealer network or these dealer franchise that are influencing these lobbyists? This seems ridiculous to me. I don't understand this. Help me understand this.
Right. Not only that, but you're talking about companies building facilities in Connecticut, contributing to the local economies, contributing to employment, accelerating EV adoption, accelerating the installation of EV infrastructure. Also, that's why the Electrical Workers Union supports direct sales. And I think the dealers are ideally situated as a lobbying force in that they're backed by these very large manufacturers, and they're well financed, and yet they have a position in numerous communities throughout the state. And they may be good actors locally. They may sponsor a local Little League team or other charities, and they have personal relationships. And it seems that the legislators are just frightened.
I'll tell you what, Barry, I want to help with this. I don't know what I can do, but I get angered when I hear this, regardless of the state. Look, if you're doing something nefarious, you come up with a new business model that's something is illegal or nefarious, or you know what, use government to shut it down. But when you've got something that is just a better model, protectionism is not the answer. The answer is change your model and compete, right? Barry, this is great. I'd love to give you just the open mic for whatever else you'd like to say. And you know, I'd like to maybe have you back on the channel. We can talk about some additional topics going forward. But, you know, first of all, thanks again for coming on. But what else would you like to share with the audience today? Or what could we be doing to help, you know, you, and what could others be doing in their local states and communities to help similar, let's say, efforts that you drive here in the state of Connecticut?
Well, our club is brand agnostic. And we organize our own EV showcases, but we also try and support other EV showcases around the state. So if you are an EV owner, make an effort to bring your car to one of these EV showcases, because it's a great way to talk to consumers. You don't need to be an engineer. You just talk about your lived experience, and it's a great way for people to learn without sales pressure. So that's one way. The other is help us advocate, help us let our legislators know that consumers feel that things like Advanced Clean Car 2 and direct sales are important, because the more they hear from us, the harder it becomes for them to ignore us.
Right.
And our club accepts people who are not EV owners. In fact, we're a pretty significant resource for people who are the EV curious or in the shopping cycle.
I believe everyone is on an EV journey right now, even if they don't own one. A lot of people are interested. You see the ads, you know, the Super Bowl comes up and all of a sudden they see an ad for a new EV, or they look at a somebody the other day said, Dave, did you see that EV6? That thing looks amazing. Looks like a Citroen, you know, the old Citroens. I go, okay, well, that's a cool analogy, but it's the pace with which people are starting to get interested in EVs. It's just going to continue to uptick. That was pretty creative, using that cheaper data to see, you know, which dealerships, or at least which manufacturers are really at least claiming the most cheaper rebates. I was a little surprised at some of the numbers in there, but I still don't understand Toyota.
You said you're surprised at Toyota, and the reason for that, the reason the Toyota numbers is that they are what they are, is that those numbers include plug-in hybrids. So Toyota has
Prius Prime.
They have the Prius Prime, and they have the RAV4 Prime.
Yeah.
And importantly, Toyota dealers have been selling conventional hybrids longer than any other dealers.
Yes,
they're used to the hybrid pitch. So they do have one battery electric vehicle, but it doesn't really sell in very large quantities. So almost all of that is for the plug-in hybrids that they sell.
Yeah. Hey, one last topic that I recall reading about in one of your articles, Barry, was this concept of the way with which many states fund the service, or the budgets for maintaining the roads. It's on a gas tax, and the fact that, for example, here in the state of Connecticut, now that I have the Volt and the ELR, I just went up to the gas station the other day and had to remember how to put gas in a car, which was kind of funny. And but for the most part, we're 100% EV. And look, I'm using the roads, and my Model X weighs 5,300 pounds. It's ripping up the roads more than, just from a sheer weight standpoint. It's ripping up the roads more than the average ICE car that will weigh less. What is the current situation in the state of Connecticut for someone like myself? I don't pay a separate tax for having an ICE vehicle or an EV, do I? Not that I'm aware of.
No, you don't. The only thing that you do pay is that you no longer get the discount when you register. It used to be that registration was discounted. I don't remember the amount, but something like $10 or $20 when you registered an EV. That was also part of their toolbox to encourage the purchase of electric vehicles. Nobody really felt that it was having a meaningful impact on consumer behavior. And when they revamped the cheaper program, they did away with that discount as kind of a pay for. And that will accumulate over time, tens of millions of dollars of fees that would otherwise have been lost. But your question still stands. I don't think it's a huge deal at this point. We have about 36,000 electric light-duty vehicles in the state out of a total of about 2.2 million light-duty vehicles. So maybe around the end of this decade, if we can hit the target that the state has set for itself of having 500,000 light-duty EVs on the road, it'll start to make a bigger impact. Of course, the California standards have improved mileage for gasoline vehicles, so they're paying less in gas taxes than they used to, even as those vehicles have consistently grown larger, and the market is very heavy now with SUVs and pickup trucks.
Yeah.
So eventually there'll have to be a solution, and there could be any number of ways to go about it. I'd also like to point out that either Connecticut or the federal government has never been able to pass a carbon tax, right? California has a cap and trade. Connecticut tried to do that a few years ago. It was called the Transportation Climate Initiative, TCI for short, but that didn't get passed. So there are other ways that we could approach it, other types of taxes or fees. So I think it's a problem that's solvable, as I said in the article. But at this point, the fund is suffering. Yes.
Yeah. Understood. All right. Well, Barry, thank you very much again for coming on today's episode. I appreciate everyone listening. If there's something in particular that you'd like to follow up with Barry, please reach out to me at my email. I'll forward it on to Barry. If you'd like to see another episode with Barry as well, where we focus on a specific topic, let me know as well, and we'll definitely have Barry back on. Thanks again for watching another episode of Out of Spec Dave. We'll catch you on the next one. And take care, Barry.
Thank you for your interest. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.